Ooh, crazy hair today. See if I can find myself. There I am. Just wait for some people to pop on. Four people. Woot woot. Hi, Sherry. Hope you're doing well. Oh, I have a mound of papers. Hi, Karen. Hi, Rhonda. How's everybody doing today? Nice to see you guys. So, I'm kind of doing this as a, I don't want to say a redo, but a card version for YouTube, because I did one the other day on Facebook. And this is one, I should have brought the other one upstairs and I forgot it. Did I? I thought I brought it. I think I forgot it. So this is the card that we ended up finishing the other day. Isn't it beautiful? And then I ended up putting this, oh, the glare in here is awful sometimes. And it is really not pretty out today, so it's not even a great glare. But I did some stamping, repeat stamping. I just stamped off a couple different ways. And I actually used this new stamp set that's going to be coming out in the catalog. Thought it was really pretty. And then I actually ended up adding a little sentiment to the inside. And I did some trees here. Thought that was really a cool, I thought it was a really cool card. I'm now throwing into the trash can. So anyway, we did that one the other day with Mountain Air. So today, I kind of ran out of time because the other day I got a little long-winded. So today we're going to make one, excuse me, hi Diana, with Waterfront. And what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing again. So I have a piece of shimmery white cardstock, and then I have a piece of watercolor paper. And one day what I'll have to do is I'll have to do watercolor paper, Stampin' Up! Versus another one that I use. Let me bring this light back so it's not quite as dark here. And I'll have to show you just the differences between some watercolor paper. But I thought today we could do that. I also have some, my hair, look, my hair needs to be cut massively because the split ends are getting so bad. I'm having a hard time drying it. It's just kind of, but my hair is probably longer than it's been, I would bet, since I was probably 19, because I haven't had it cut in a while, number one. And number two, sometimes I like it like a mid-length short. I had it short for a long time, but sometimes I feel like, though, when you have long hair, all you do is put it in a ponytail. So if I get to that state, I usually try to get it cut. But thank you very much. I appreciate it. I have my official 2 inches of roots up here that need to be done, but I washed it. That's why it doesn't look so bad. So I also have something else to give away. Actually, I have 2. So I'm going to do 2 specific prize pools for this YouTube. So I'm going to give it a little bit because I won't necessarily do it live, but I have Best Catch to give away. And this one will be a great one for Father's Day if you don't own this stamp set already. It's really nice, very simple to use for all those fishers in your life. It doesn't even have to be men fishers because there's only one little person here. Honestly, you could probably say that was somebody with their hair in a ponytail if you really wanted to. But so if you're I have a female fishing friend or a male fishing friend, so this will be one of the giveaways. And I have a couple other things I'm going to give away as well. I also still have my Make a Splash stamp set from Facebook. I did pick a winner. I just have to mail that out. I'm going to do them all at the same time. But what we're going to do today is we're going to work with the Waterfront stamp set. And then again, I have an Aqua painter. One has water, one has alcohol, and a blender pen. And we're going to kind of fool around with the difference. I know it's not a very pretty day. It's very dreary here in Maryland. It's been raining and sometimes pouring all day. It's just kind of been one of those not pretty days, not pretty whatsoever. But I'm going to flip the camera down. So thank you all for joining me today. I hope everybody is getting notifications. I don't know. Sometimes it's working. Sometimes it's not. But I'm going to flip you around. And so just look away for a moment. It's gloomy in Oregon too. Yeah. I think the earth is cleansing everything with the water and all this stuff. It's crazy. Oh, good. I'm glad you got notified. Thanks for sharing that, Diana. One other thing I wanted to tell you guys, and I don't know that you're aware of this, so I'm just going to take a minute to show you, just in case, because I just realized it when I was updating some stuff the other day. But let me pop. I just want to, I'll put this here so you have something to look at just for a second while I pull this up. And I've tried to kind of go back after the fact and organize these a little bit better, which is why I wanted to show you. But in case you weren't aware, on my site, now it does look different when you look at this on mobile versus on a computer. But if you scroll, so I always have my host code up here. So this is the current month host code. And anything that you click on will give you more information about it. But if you are ever looking for something specific, like let's just say, for example, you wanted to know how to do alcohol and ink painting. You know, I have all these categories here. So if you click on it, it will bring up the projects that have those specific tags in them. Okay, so just as an FYI, but I was looking through for techniques, because I always like to look at technique videos myself on all kinds of blogs and Pinterest and everything. But you can scroll through. There are a ton of categories because I put categories on every single blog post that I do. So there's 57 technique things. So if you look up, it'll tell you Aqua Painter versus Blender Pen, watercolors on white heat embossing, partial die cutting. There's lots of stuff here. So just in case you ever can't find an idea or you can't find something to do, if you go to rachthestamper.com, and that was about halfway down on the right, it's categories, and you can search that way. So it's real. I think it's very, very helpful personally. So I just wanted to point that out in case you didn't know, because sometimes, you know, you only figure things out by figuring out that, oh, after the fact, you're like, oh, who knew? Who knew that's what the way that was? You haven't seen the sun in a week. You know, it was really beautiful yesterday. It was supposed to be kind of chilly yesterday, but it ended up being, I think by the end of the day, in the mid-70s. The sun was out. It was like the perfect late spring day. It was so beautiful. Oh, you made the graduation card. That's awesome. That's so cool for preschool dino days. What a great idea. I love that. That's amazing. How fun. That's so cute. I made yesterday a card. Actually, I was just cleaning it up. The neighbor across the street, it was her birthday, and she loves sloth. So I used, where is it? I'll show you in case you don't know. And granted, he does have a Band-Aid on, but I made her a sloth card with the back on your feet. And I used the wobblers. So I made it so he wobbled on there. He was really, really cute. And I said to Christian, what should we do for the background? He's like, oh, pink. Pretty much any color pink I think she'll like. So I made her a pink sloth card, and I even used some of the Valentine's paper. It just had hearts all over it. I thought it was really, really cute. Okay, so to get started, we have a piece of watercolor paper, and then I have a piece of shimmery white cardstock. Now, shimmery white cardstock does take ink pretty well. As a matter of fact, when we did this one, this is on watercolor paper. This was the one that was definitely significantly more wet. I swear I brought that other card up here. If I didn't, I'm going to be mad at myself. I bet I left it downstairs. Oh, no, here it is. This is the other one. That way I can show you. I was cutting up my DSP so I can start using it too. This was the one that was on the shimmery paper. And it still turned out really, really pretty. So it just kind of depends on what you want to do with it. But you can totally tell. Like, this has much more of a cloud outline. Even though that wasn't a cloud, we just kind of left some white space. But when they dry versus when they're wet, they look so different. So again, shimmery white paper, and then this is watercolor paper. So we're going to do one of each of these today, but instead we're going to use Waterfront and switch it up a little bit. I think I'm still going to get out the Stamparatus, just because sometimes depending on how you want to work your card, it kind of makes it work out a little bit better. especially depending on your positioning more specifically with your watercolor paper, because watercolor paper, depending on what brand you use, this is Stampin' Up's paper, but what brand you use, they usually have a side that's a little softer and then a side that's a little more toothy and a little bit deeper. So just depending on what side you want to use, I would typically try to stick with the side that's a little softer. So, but we'll do both. We'll do one of each. And I do apologize. I took off my nail polish because we did some gardening the other day. Rainbow Stamper was helping me plant some plants. We planted a whole bunch of stuff in the backyard, and my nails were a hot mess. And I just forgot to repaint them since then. So I know personally, I think if I like it when your nails are either like a little bit shorter if they're natural or if you're going to paint them. So just realized that I forgot, but that's okay. We'll just pretend like I did. Okay, so for this, the nice part about this is that you have a lot of options. So you could use this as a mountain. I've done this once before, actually, too, with a volcano. You could use this as water, so it could be a lake, or it could be kind of a lake that's coming down. So you could use this either way. So you remember the other day when I was talking about stamping, look at things from different directions because they could be different things. This could be a little bit of a cloud in the sky or a sandbar or a beach bar. So lots of different things. So for this one, we're going to have to use our imagination a little bit more with this stamp set. I do have, for my Stamparatus, I do have my black foam mat underneath. You need that when you're stamping with photopolymer, and just a piece of grid paper, just so it kind of helps me line up better. Honestly, I probably could use this again because of the lines here, so I could switch this to the other side, but I'm just going to flip it for now. And then I'll kind of just pick a spot. So I'll just put it so the corner is right here. So when I typically do it that way, if I'm doing the other side, usually what I'll do is I'll put a little pencil mark here. That way, if I go to reposition and I know right where it is. So I do that sometimes too, just because I'm being lazy. Or you could put it all the way up to the top, but that's just going to throw you off a little bit. So for this one, what we'll do, forgot I took them out, is we're going to do some kind of maybe some mountains in the background. So we're going to pretend like we are on a California shoreline, and we'll have a little bit of a mountain background here. So for this one, because of the Stamparatus, I'm actually going to pick this one up just with a block. Oops. And you know what? Now that I think about it, I am going to put this up top because otherwise I'm going to end up forgetting, and I'll put it in the wrong space or something, most likely. So we'll do this in like a soft brown. I'll just start with crumb cake because we can stamp off if it's, or we can actually add a different color too if we wanted to. So we'll say, let's see what this looks like first. So that's not too bad. It's a little lighter at the base, which is kind of nice. So I'm going to stamp, oh, I'm having a day here. You know why? Because this needs to be straight if you're going all the way up to the top, Rach. Lord have mercy. One of these days. All right. So we'll kind of go up here a little bit. I'm going to ink one. Let me move this down just a smidge. And then without re-inking, I'll do another one up here a little higher. And then I'm going to fully ink again. We'll kind of put one over here. So I'm kind of leaving a little space in between there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of bring the water so it feeds below, and then we'll fill it in a little bit, okay? So that was crumb cake, okay, stamped off. So now remember, and I don't think I got a scrap paper. Grab one. So remember, if you're using your Aqua painter, this is water. Here I am smelling it. Nope, that's alcohol. So your water in, or your alcohol in your Aqua painter is going to spread the color, but it's not going to spread it the same as if you were to use water. So that's not really doing a whole lot. So generally what you'll do is you'll just kind of squeeze it to wet your tip. You don't really want it like sopping wet. You kind of just lightly spread the color. Now if you look at this, so I'll do the same thing with water in this Aqua painter. And then we'll go over here and spread this around. And it should Now granted, this is one of the old style linen pads. So it should. That is, oh man, maybe that was alcohol. You know what? I bet you I didn't even grab the one that had water in it. Is that what I did? One of these goes the right way. Let me see. Hold on one second. Did I empty out my water pen? Jiminy Christmas, I bet I did. Technical difficulties. Okay, this one's definitely the water. Would say I should put a W on here, but I'll probably change it and then forget. So long story short, what you're trying to do is you're going to spread a little bit more when you use water versus alcohol. So generally, this shimmery white paper is thicker than our white cardstock. And it might even be comparable to the Thick Whisper white, but it's not nearly as thick as the watercolor paper. Okay, so what we're going to do is we have that in there. Now I'm going to bring in some actual water. So if we were to stamp, and we'll say, kind of depending on where you want your lake. So it could come this way. It could come this way. You could have your water go down. So go like that. That looks pretty good. But I still want to fill in a little bit up here. Okay, so the other thing that you have to remember is with all of these stamps, like there's different ones. We have Waterfront, we have Snowfront, and there's one other one, and I can't think of it right now, but they all have, My Meadow. They all have little components that you honestly can use together. So if this was almost like a little bit too much, we could kind of fit this in and then layer this on top of it. So that's what I think we're going to do for now. So let me move this. So I'm going to kind of fit this in so it's going to kind of look like the water is filling in around here. And then we're going to pick this up with our Stamparatus. Now the only reason I did it this way is in case it's not quite dark enough, we can restamp, because I'm going to do it with Seaside Spray, which is a pretty light color. So I'm just going to ink this up like so. That's not bad. And then if you wanted to, so we'll say this one was the one that had, I believe, the water. And kind of soften the edge there a little bit. Okay. And then the other thing you can even do is take your pad and squeeze. You'll have a little pool there. And just bring in just a little bit. I'm going to just squeeze a teeny bit of water here. You still don't want to get the shimmery white too wet. And you can kind of just bring in a little bit of, almost like it's coming down, and kind of fill in a little bit of that. Just soften the edges of it a little bit. There you go. Just like that. So that's pretty good. Now we're going to do a similar thing. So I'm going to bring in the kind of bigger funnel of water. Kind of say like that. So just for the sake of keeping these two scenes similar, I'm going to take my plate out, pull it, and flip it. I probably should have cleaned this off, but I'm not going to. I'm going to close this and pick up now my other stamp. Again, I'll just make sure this is centered. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. Seaside Spray. I'm going to just ink it directly. And then what I'm going to try, you can see this one is very, very stained because I used the brush out on it. So that's not bad there at all. I'm going to just spread this a little bit, kind of while it's freshly stamped. Do the same thing again. I'm just going to slide this back and just pick up a little bit more of the color here. Again, this is my water brush. There we go. Now, one other thing you could do if you wanted to is you could even go back and add a little bit of a darker color. So we could add a little bit of Pacific Point just to kind of give you a little bit of a darker edge. So I'm going to add just a little water. Not a whole lot, more color than water, and kind of just add, you know, like a couple other color streaks just to give it a little bit of depth. It is still going to wrinkle your paper. I can see it bowing up just a teeny bit, which is fine because we can stick it down once we're done, and everything will glue down really nicely. We can run it through like we did with a little piece of printer paper. That looks pretty good right there. So we're going to leave that kind of like that. So now you kind of have two options with this. You can either fill in the rest of this with stamps, because what we could do is we could clean this off. Just show you what I mean. So if we were to clean this one off, we could almost just fill in the rest of the area with water, but kind of flip it upside down. We could use some of the other longer pieces here if we wanted to add like some rock kind of formation or beach formation, or we could just bring in some color and do it just like that. So what we're going to do is, and I said we were going to do a beach, but this is totally has now turned into a lake instead of a beach. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in a little bit of kind of a sand filling around here. So not really beachy beach, more like a lake desert, I guess, kind of look now that we're going for. So I'm going to do Pineapple Punch, which this color is retiring pretty soon. Gosh, I think we only have like a couple more weeks. That's really sad. I'm going to miss Pineapple Punch. That was definitely one of my favorite of these in colors. So I'm going to add, this is alcohol now. I'm going to add a little bit of alcohol to this. And I'm going to kind of just bring in a little bit. It's a very light color once it's diluted, so just a little bit. You could do dots if you wanted to instead. I'm just going to do a couple streaks, and then we're going to bring in another color. So it just kind of gives a little bit of yellow. Now this in here specifically, because it's alcohol, it will evaporate pretty quickly. If you were going to flip this over and stamp with it, you might want to put sop up the excess first, but I'm not going to do that. So we can kind of bring in a little bit of Sahara sand now. So same thing, I'm going to just add a little alcohol to this. And Sahara sand is an unusual color because it definitely has a lot more green in it than you really originally think. So kind of near the edge where the lake is, I'm going to bring in a little bit more. That way it's kind of almost like that wet-ish look. And you can see still the paper is bowing a little bit, but it's still going to be okay as long as you don't get it sopping wet. And kind of be a little bit more specific right around some of these edges. So we'll say we have a little more shadow on this side. And then I'm just going to spread it just a little bit. Other thing that's nice about the aqua painters, you can shape your brush if you wanted a certain way. Now the new one, there are 3 of them that are going to be coming out that are going to replace this because these are retiring. But they definitely have some cool features too. And then the other thing that's really neat about this right now, looking at it as it's going, you can see the sparkle through the paper. So I'm really looking forward to the new one because it's got a lot of potential for different things. I can't really tell you, I guess, too much about it, but it'll be fun. Let's just put it that way. So this to me still is a little bit kind of like with the lines. I'm like, I don't really love all that part of it that much because it is a little too liney for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab, let's see, we could do a sponge or we could do a dauber. So might as well, we'll just do this with a dauber. So I'm going to grab a little bit more of my crumb cake. And I'm going to just stick this on. Okay. Now, when you're doing anything with your sponge dauber, you kind of want to start off first because you want to get a little bit of the excess ink off. So you're not getting either 2 things, a really big circle of color that you're kind of like, oh, what am I going to do with that? Because it's kind of hard to get rid of a circle once you do it. But it also just kind of helps to get the main buildup of ink off. So it makes it a little bit softer. So I'm just kind of blending around, filling in a little bit of that space. Which kind of, the other thing that's funny is you'll think to yourself, well, why do you keep inking it up if you're just wiping off the ink? You just don't want it to be wet, really. Okay, so that's pretty good. Kind of get that a little bit more. I do like the edges to be a little bit, when you're doing like a beachy scene. Kind of bring up here into the mountains, just color up a little bit of that area. So that's pretty. Okay, so same thing we could do. I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to just bring, since we have this little pool of ink here, I'm going to just put a little bit of edging right up here at the top. So I'm not adding any alcohol. I'm just kind of coming up here, trying to use the tippy tip of this marker so it's a really nice point, just to add in a little bit of a definitive edge to some of this mountain here. Just like so. And I'm by no means an expert, so just practice. That's really all you could do. The better, you will get better at it by the more that you practice. And also by making mistakes, which I know nobody likes to do, most especially me, most especially live, but so just a little bit of shading there. I don't want to shade this one quite as much because it's a little bit more muted in the background, so I'm kind of trying to wait until I get my ink a little bit more worn off. So there's that. I'm not going to fool with it. I do still want to add, though, a sky. And what I think would be really pretty, but we would have to let this dry, is to maybe do a little bit pink in the background. But I think we're going to have to give this a minute to dry before we would do that. And I would say we'll do like a little bit of Blushing Bride, kind of like that little sunset, the fade to sunset. Maybe a teeny little bit of, I don't want to say, I think mango will be a little too much. Maybe a little bit of crushed curry might be nice. So we'll do that. And actually, you know what I'm going to do this? This one has a nice puddle in it, so we'll do that one. See if this one has a puddle. Yeah, so we're pretty good with both of these. Let me just scoot this out of the way, put a couple of these things out of the way. So once again, I'm mainly using more so the alcohol for this particular paper. Again, this is shimmery white. When everything does dry, it really does have a pretty shine to it. It's not like obnoxiously glittery, but you can see it's on there. So same thing again, I'm going to add a little bit of alcohol to the Blushing Bride. And, oops, kind of just have to decide where you think you want the sun to be, because you don't want it to be the whole over part, because it's not going to be on the whole thing. So I'm going to kind of just pick the center. So I just kind of put a little bit of, as if it's on the back of that mountain. And I want to have it much more diffused for the rest of it. So I'm just adding a little bit more water. And kind of spreading it out a little bit here. A little bit more, and then I'm going to bring in a little bit of the crushed curry. So that's a little pink. It's very barely pink. That'll be a good color for ink. I'm sure somebody has invented that one, barely pink. That'd be nice. So I'm just adding a good amount of water to this crushed curry because I want it to be pretty diluted. So let me just, so it might be a little too diluted. There we go. I just want to add a little bit of kind of sun area to the back here. Now the cool part about is when you do watercolor paper, you can actually wet it ahead of time. And that way you can kind of help the water to diffuse easier. When you're doing it on this type of paper, it does make it a little bit more difficult. I'm just kind of trying to bring a little bit of that yellow to the edge of that pink to kind of bring them together, and it should give us a little bit of a orangey look almost, kind of soften that pink. And I might have to go back and do a little bit of retouching with my mountain. But what I might do is now I'm going to bring in, I'm going to let this dry. So actually I'm going to hit this with the heat tool for just a minute. Just to dry it off a little bit. Hello from Phoenix. Hi, Jean. Thanks for joining us. Jean, I think I'm channeling some Arizona on this. I don't know. Thinking of a little mountain lake in the desert. Okay. So this will be a good time to do the blender pen. And the reason I say the blender pens are really nice for many, many things. These are great for using with watercolor pencils because there's just enough wet to kind of smooth it around. Great for using if you don't necessarily have the marker that goes with it, or also if you have the marker but you want a lighter version. So this is kind of like a light marker or whatever it may be. So if you have crumb cake and you're going to do something with crumb cake with your marker, you're going to see it's going to be pretty dark. But if you take your same ink pad and your blender pen and you kind of, you don't really have to load up too much color. You touch it a little bit. It also gives you a really nice point. It really softens it. You can get different shades and different hues with an ink pad that is the same color, but just with a blender pen. So I'm going to go ahead and hit my crumb cake. And I'm just going to kind of bring in a little bit more of this mountain and then just fade it out where we were. So I'm kind of bringing back that edge that we drew on, that when we added that ink, it kind of diffused it a little bit. So I'm going to do it a little bit down here at the bottom too, just to kind of bring that definition back. And you can use this over and over again. So I'm going to try to stay just on the one side so we have kind of a little bit of more of the shadowing that I seem to have chose to go with. The only thing you have to be careful with when you use your blender pen excessively in one spot, sometimes it can make your paper a little bit pilly. However, that is more so with the regular Whisper White. The shimmery white holds up really, really well. So if you look at this pen right now, you can see the tip of it is dirty and it will wipe off, but I'm just going to use that really light portion, hopefully, to just bring in a little bit of color, and I'm just turning it as I'm using it to try to get the color out of it. So when you're finished, all you're going to do is just keep wiping, and you can see, even though it's got a little bit of a brown tip, it's clear. So you can use it over and over again. So we just kind of add in a little bit of shading. I'm going to just do a little bit more right here, so we kind of have a little definition on that one. Maybe a little bit more up at the top. Okay, and I think that's pretty good. So this is pretty soft, edgy, deserty kind of card. So if you wanted to, you could maybe put some, like a little rock mound that you started, and then just as you work down, it's going to get a little bit lighter. So you could add a little bit of a formation, something maybe you've been out to, and I don't know, I've never been to any of these places, so I'm going to randomly say places that probably have nothing to do with each other, but I believe Zion National Park has rock formations. I assume there's a ton of places because I've seen Cars and Cars 2 and Cars 3. So I know that they have some places on Route 66 that have some pretty amazing rock foundations, but I don't really know anything because I've never, unfortunately, I've seen the Grand Canyon. That's about as far out as I've been. So you can add a little bit of a soft rock formation if you wanted to, just to add a little bit of visual interest to something. But you'd probably be better if you got something out, or maybe you've been there and you know what it looks like. Just add just a little bit of something in here. So, and then you can also go through, even if you wanted to, and add a little bit of darkness to your shoreline. And then I wouldn't add it in a line, because if you add it kind of in sparsely as you go, it almost gives you a depth like this would be a cliff that the water would be going down to. So just kind of play around with it. Honestly, I'm definitely not a person who is trained in any sort of art or anything like that, but I like to learn by goofing stuff up. Is probably the best thing. I know that I saw recently, I don't know if any of you, if you do have Disney Plus, there is a really cool thing, and I think it was actually on Nat Geo before that, but it's called Into the Canyon, and it was about these guys that hiked down into the Grand Canyon and how beautiful the Colorado River was. So I think it's pretty considering, so it's kind of a different card. So thank you very much. I appreciate that, Joanne. This was a totally off the cuff, and luckily it kind of turned out remotely looking good card. So that will be number 1, and we will mount this on something. So we're going to go again by starting with, we're going to use our, where is it? My watercolor paper. Here it is. So we're going to try to do a same card again. Now this one is much smaller because you can see where our line moves. So I'm going to erase this, and then we'll put a new line right here. So that's going to kind of hopefully keep it somewhat centered for us. Now, one thing we could do on this one, because we are working with watercolor paper, is we can actually do some of the work ahead of time. So what we'll do is we'll wet this for our sky first, and then we'll fill in the mountains afterwards, okay? So we have our crushed curry. Put this away. And we have our blushing bride. Whoopsie. Never enough room. No matter how big your desk is or how much you have, there is just never enough room. Okay, so let me make sure that I have the correct one first. I think that is water. Pretty sure that's water because I think I capped the alcohol. Yeah. All right, so the alcohol is capped. So what I'm going to do is make sure my aqua painter is clean. And I'm going to just wet, not a whole lot because this paper is much shorter, but I'm going to wet kind of right up here. Again, I don't want it soaking wet. I just want it a little bit wet. As you get better, and I'm just going to kind of put where I would imagine the mountains would be. As you get better, you can move on to doing more of like a soaking wet color. So once again, I'm just going to add a little water here to the blushing bride. And I'm picking up just a little bit ink, not a whole lot. And I'm going to kind of go like on those spots where I already touched. And what this helps do, now if I touch anything down here that's dry, it's not going to spread. It's just going to kind of sit in a puddle. But it'll kind of help to spread your ink. And the other thing you can do is you can move your stuff down so it'll kind of run down as you go. You can move it around. Now that's more so when you have really, really wet paper. So that will be our pink. Just wipe this off. I'm actually going to close this too. There's where I stuck it in that other ink pad. So I'm going to do the same thing again. So this is still damp, but it is nowhere near wet. So now I'm going to pick up some of the crushed curry. And we're just going to kind of fill in. And you're going to see it's not going to really move as much as that pink did because it's not wet. It's just damp. And we're just going to kind of spread the sky. But the nice part is when you do it this way, you can almost combine these two and get that nice orange we were talking about. So we'll just keep coming in with the yellow. And the other thing is once this is dry, then we can kind of go in with our mountains. We can actually make them darker. We could do soft suede this time. So I'm just kind of spreading, tapping. You don't really have to do any specific kind of a motion, but just make sure you get to the edge. You can always trim it up if you wanted to. And now if you want these colors to be a little bit more blended, you can actually go ahead in here and kind of touch the pink. And then let's see, bring in a little bit more of that crushed curry. And then you're going to get more of that orangey look because you're reactivating the ink color by wetting it. And I'm not squeezing this while I'm doing it. I'm just kind of keeping my finger on it, because if you squeeze it, it's definitely going to get super wet. And you can just kind of diffuse that color. So you have a little bit more of a orangey sunset. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this up and I'm going to heat this to dry it. So I'm going to high heat, just go front and back to try to dry this a little bit. Because you don't want to stamp on them. That is one important thing when you're using watercolor paper, regardless of if you're using watercolors. But if you don't allow it time to dry in between or dry it, then you can get really muddy over colors. And that's just not very pretty. So what we're going to do this time is instead, we're going to make these mountains really, really dark on the front side. We'll see if we can go for the same scheme with having the 3, but have them dark. Oh, that's so nice. I'm glad, Karen. My in-laws just came and picked up their groceries not that long ago. Don't worry, we'll be here for the replay if you need it. Okay, so this is dry. Maybe a teeny bit slightly damp here, but this is what we're going to stick with. So I'm going to put this up in the top. And I'm going to put my magnet here to hold it. So I think I can set that there. It's pretty well dry now. So then we have our piece here. I'm going to clean this off. That way we can put it down without worrying about it smudging. And what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to use the Stamparatus, and I might just move this around a little bit. So I'm going to start with the outside first. I'm going to pick this up. And again, I did say I wanted to do, I'm not going to do early espresso because that's almost a little too dark, but I am going to do soft suede because we can always stamp this twice if we want a little darker. So, good position. I'm going to ink this up. Now remember, when you're stamping on watercolor paper, even if you have the smooth side, it definitely is not smooth like Whisper White or even Shimmery White. So it's going to take a little bit more to get your ink in there, okay? So you can do one of two things. You can either restamp it if you wanted to, or you can take one of 3 things. You could use your blender pen, and you could smooth the ink out a little bit. Look how nice that makes it. It totally gets rid of that little gritty paper look, and then we can kind of bring this up behind. So I'll show you that one, and then I'll show you what you could do if you did it with your Aqua painters. Kind of just soften out the colors. Just like so. And I'm kind of just bringing whatever color is on the blender pen down just a little bit. Okay, so there's one way to do it. Just remember, make sure you clean your pencil off or your blender pen off when you're done. So then, if I wanted to have one that was kind of over here, we'll say right about there. So I'm going to go with this line. I'm going to line this up here. So same thing again, I'm just re-inking with the soft suede. Put this on the outside. Oh, I don't blame you, Karen. That's probably smart. That's probably, regardless of being in a senior home, that's probably a really smart idea to stay in as much as you can. Especially if you're a little older. My in-laws are the same. Matter of fact, my dad is going to be 70 in just about a week and a half. Okay, so now this one is the water, the alcohol in the Aqua painter. So we're going to take this. And we're just very lightly kind of blending out that color. There is a little yellow behind this mountain because of where I stamped it. But once you kind of fill in the soft suede, you can't really see it quite as much. But you can see, like, as in, so just to explain it, you see when we did this with the blender pen, how I was able to bring the color down. The alcohol doesn't work that way. It kind of just lights or re-wets just what you're using, but it doesn't really give you enough to smudge it anywhere. So that's kind of nice about the alcohol because you can actually use it to your advantage if you only want color on one thing. Whereas if you take now, this one is the water, and we spread it, and you can see it's going to come down here, and you can smudge it a little bit more. So you can see how this came down lower with the water, and then when we had the alcohol, it didn't really spread outside of the stamped image at all. So just a couple cool tips. That's the neat thing too about alcohol. If you do use these just to paint with, it's not going to smudge the rest of your images that are previously stamped because it really only wets what it's touching. Just move this out just a little. Just want to go up a little bit so we kind of have that behind. There we go. Okay, so there are those two. Now the only thing we have to do, I'm going to put this on the side, is the center. And I think I want to do the center one a little bit lighter. So if we were going for the center, let's see where it would line up. Oh my goodness, it just started pouring, you guys. So we'll say right about here. So that's about approximately. So I just want to put this here. And I want to put another little mark here. And the reason is, what I want to do is I want to stamp, I'm going to ink this up, I'm going to stamp it, and then I'm going to stamp it off, and then I'm going to stamp it on here, so it's just a little lighter. So let me move this, ink up my stamp. Oops. Stamp it. And then slide this in. I think that's right where it was, because I wanted it down just a little bit. Yeah, that's definitely much lighter. Okay, so it's a lot lighter, which is good. That's what I wanted. And then I'm going to take the water one more time and just very lightly, because I don't want to get that sunset too muddy. So I'm really trying to be gentle. And I'm not squeezing at all. I'm just kind of blending the texture of that stamp out a little bit. Just like so. Soften the edge. Again, this is water, so it is letting us go outside the lines a little bit, which is a blessing and a curse. Just make sure you're careful. But the way you have the shading at the top of the stamp, it really worked out to kind of fill in that natural color for us without really much effort at all. So that looks really good. So I'm going to clean this stamp off and this whole window. That way we can do our water. Okay, so we get rid of the mountain. So I'm going to put him back. And then, so what you could even do for this one is you could have like a little bit more of like the water coming down. So say the water came out of here, let's just say for example, and then we could have it continuing to come down a little bit farther and then follow. So let's do that one this way, and then what we'll do with this down here is we'll make this grassy instead. Okay, so kind of change it up so it's kind of similar but not exact. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to put my stamp back up here where I had it before, because I still want to have just that little bit of color kind of up there, how this one was. So we're going to put a little bit of color up there first. So that was Seaside Spray. Oh, thank you for sharing that there. This is a really cool tool. It's a Stamparatus. It makes it really easy for you to stamp. It's similar to lots of other stamp positioning tools, because there definitely are lots of them. But this one is very unique in the fact that you can have these platforms. So we're going to have our water kind of going crazy over here. But you can have all these different platforms. You can take it out, flip it over without having to do anything. So that's pretty cool. And then you can add a whole nother stamp to it. So let's see what we're going to do. I think I'm going to stick with this. Let's see what that looks like. So if we were to move that, let's see if there's enough room over here for what I wanted to do. So using our imagination here, we're going with that kind of for the water. And this piece coming down. I might have to flip it a little bit. I might have to just do part of it and then have it come down. So I think I'm going to ink kind of to one side for this one. So this is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to move it over just slightly. So for this one, I'm going to kind of stop. I'm going to ink this part. I'm going to let this kind of fade off a little. So I'm going to do my best when I ink this to kind of just stay away from this one tip. Kind of bring a little bit because you don't want it just to be a line. So I'm kind of trying to move back and forth a little bit. We can always add to if we need it. So, let's see if I do that correctly, hopefully. Yep, not so bad. And then we can blend this out a little bit. So I'm going to pick this up again and flip it over. That way we can add our little water. I think I probably would like a little bit more of an angle, but that's okay. We'll kind of have this part poking out. Move this over. And then we'll fix all this so it looks a little bit smoother once we finish stamping this part. So same thing again. I'm going to go with the Seaside Spray ink. There's one. And then I'm going to bring this down. Turn it around. Like that. That seems a little weird, but we should be able to blend it that it goes together okay. If you were being careful, you probably would have cleaned that stamp off before you moved it, but you know how I roll, like a jelly donut. I know, I can't help it. I say these crazy things. And I do love jelly donuts, that's for sure. Okay, so once again, this is the water. I'm just going to make sure it's fairly wet before we start. I don't want it wet that it's dripping, but so we're going to just take and kind of soften up our ink a little bit. And then what we can do, so that is, I didn't say it's wet, but it's wetter. I'm going to take a little bit of Balmy Blue, and this has a lot of ink in the bottom here, so I'm not going to squeeze it. And just bring in a little bit of other color. Just to kind of change the color, the edge of the color a little bit. And these pieces we can end up filling in with a nice green for the grass. What I probably will do is I'm going to fill this in a little bit more, but I want to let it dry first. So what I'm going to do is, let me wipe these couple little things off, and I want to dry this a little bit, and then we'll work on getting these colors blended just a little bit better. Okay, so I'm going to hit this with the heat tool again, because this is pretty bubbly from all the water. Yeah, the Misty. I had a Misty before the Stamparatus came out, which, being honest, which I always try to be, I really had a hard time moving from the Misty to the Stamparatus because they're kind of opposite in the way they're set up. Whereas the Misty, you have your corner and then the hinges on the other side, and this one's kind of the opposite. So definitely was something to get used to. I will not lie about that. So what we're going to try to do now is we're going to try to bring in some green, okay? So we're going to do the same way again. I have my blender pen. We're going to bring in a little bit with the blender pen, and I'm going to start with Pear Pizzazz as kind of more my overall color. So I have Pear Pizzazz, and we're going to bring in probably a little bit of Granny Apple Green, and maybe a little bit of a lighter green if we need to. So I'm going to just kind of start. Oops, I got a smudge there. Oh well, that's okay. Kind of start with a nice softish, I kind of want it to be slightly uniform green for now. And then we can always add in a little bit more. Kind of a little heavier at the edge of the water, color-wise. So remember, once this is wet, you can always go back and add more color just kind of by touching it, and it'll kind of drop it in there, which looks pretty neat. And then as you go out to the side, it will soften. And again, I'm not really squeezing while I'm using this. I'm kind of just squeezing occasionally just to make sure it's still wet. So that looks pretty good for that side thus far. We're going to blend this together just a little bit more. Hopefully my head's not in your way. I'll check in one sec. Nope. Try my best to stay out of your way. Okay, so there is our green. Now, I'm going to do that again on the other side. But for right now, I think I'm going to bring in actually a little bit of old olive, more for the edge. So I'm squeezing to make a little puddle here because I want this to be kind of like a medium version of this color. And then same thing again. We'll just kind of bring a little bit on the edge. This is starting to dry out just a little on the paper, I mean. So it's whatever you put down now is going to be a little bit more solid. Solid of a color, I should say. Super excited. We're having Greek food for dinner tonight. It's one of my absolute favorite foods. And I'm going to put, just because I kind of like the way it turned out, I'm going to put a little bit of the edging up here at the bottom of the green. Can kind of almost be like, you can use your imagination. Could be trees, could be grass line. Very interpretive. Okay, so that actually looks really good. And we could just add maybe just a few, you got a little ahead of myself here. A few little darker streaks of green kind of here and there just for some depth. So that looks really good. I think that looks really, really awesome. Almost makes me not want to add in this side, but we have to, because if not, I don't know what's going to happen over here. It could be water. Water could come up this mountain. You know, how about water? We're going to go with water because the way the shading is, it's almost so perfect. I feel like if I fool with it, I'm going to ruin it. So I'm going to bring in on this side instead of doing grass on both sides. We're going to do water. So it's going to be like water coming to this. So we might have to lighten this up a little bit. Let's see. We will go with, I'm going to try a little pretty peacock. Let's see. This might be a hair too dark, but we're going to try anyway. So I have a little bit down here. Same thing again. And what I'm going to do to kind of combat the potential disaster is I'm going to wet this. So I'm just going to squeeze this a little. Again, we are on the water, and I'm just going to lightly wet this. Water in the aqua painter, I mean. I know you know we're painting water. So, let's see. Been years since you had Greek food. I love Greek food. It's one of my favorite things to eat. I'm getting a big old spanakopita, and I'm going to eat it all myself. So we're going to start over here on the edge. Kind of just lightly bringing this in. We're going to try to blend it into what we already stamped as well. Same thing. We don't want it too dark because you don't want to go from like you had this blue, now all of a sudden you have this Mediterranean looking water. So we're going to bring in more than just this one. So I'm going to cool it with the pretty peacock for now. Then I'm going to go back a little bit more to the seaside spray. There should be enough in there. Let me just give this just a little squeeze. And if you have a hard time with squeezing this, you can also just grab a drop of the refill and put it in. Just know it's going to be way more concentrated, so you're going to really need to be careful when you start, okay? But I know sometimes these are a little hard to squeeze, this newer style of pad. So same thing again, little water. Might have to add a little white to this to kind of maybe play up a little bit of a rolling shore look. I'm going to bring a little bit off the pad. Okay. One other thing you can do, which if I would have thought of this, I thought maybe what I was going to do ahead of time, you can also bring a paper towel And then if you don't like something, once you wet it, you can pick it up and it'll actually pick up some of the ink off of there. So you can see it did pick up some of the ink. It'll make it a little bit softer. So that's also another option. So I'm going to do Balmy Blue. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this because I want it a little darker. I'm going to take my re-inker and just drop a drop. You can see that is way darker than what it looks like here, which this color could technically have been used. So that could be why it's a little darker. And I'm going to squeeze some water in here. Squeeze a lot. See, but even you can see that with your water, that when you add it, it'll move the hue around a little bit. And I'm going to go just a little bit more. A little bit more to the lighter side. I want to darken it up a little bit. I think my favorite food to eat more than anything is cheese. I do love cheese. Cheese and chocolate are my favorite things to eat. But I really love Greek food. I also really love hot turkey with gravy and fries. That's one of my faves. Turkey clubs. That looks really, I think it looks kind of neat. I think probably if we would have known ahead of time what we know now, maybe I wouldn't have used this stamp here. And I would have tried to soften it out a little bit by just bringing in the water and kind of keeping the mountains. But see if we can. Probably could stamp over it again to make it a little bit more even, but that's okay. So I'm going to close this up for now. We're going to try this one more time. And I'm going to heat this once more. Because remember what we talked about. Once this dries, it's going to look way different than it looks right now. I know the green, I am super proud of myself with the green. Every once in a while, I'll hit a really, really good job. Oh, my battery just told me 20%. Don't worry, we'll be done by then, battery. And you can even tell, even now with it just being dry, that except for the fact we know we stamped that, it doesn't look quite as obvious that it was a stamp for the water part. Just kind of makes the water look a little different. What we can do is, before we're done. Now, one thing I will tell you, and I'm going to pull this out just so you can see. If you have, so Craft White ink, it used to come like this ink. Mine is, I am not exaggerating, as long as I've been stamping. I've had this probably for 17 or 18 years. If you have a blender pen for white, you want to save it because you can't really get the white out of it. So you definitely want to be a little bit more careful with that. So you can do one of two things. You could put some re-inker in here. You can kind of just dab off of your ink depending on how recently you've re-inked it. Or if you just have the ink refill, you could even put a little bit of it on a block. So I'll show you what I mean. So you could take your ink refill. You just want to make sure you clean this off when you're done. Put a little dab on there. Oh, goodness. Pardon my stomach growling. I'm talking about food and my stomach's growling. And so this is going to give you very concentrated. If you put a little bit of water, not a lot, maybe just a drop. Kind of spread it around a little bit. It'll get a little bit more liquidy. And then you can kind of add like a little bit of a, oh my gosh, I just spit on that. How embarrassing. Add a little bit of a water, like as if not really a wave, but kind of like a surge. There you go, a surge of water around this to kind of hide some of these little dark spots. It's almost as if these little waves are kind of starting to come on shore. Heading towards the shore. That looks good. I don't want to do too much. If you want this to be much more white, what you could do is you take this ink, because this is a pigment ink, and it will stay wet for a little bit. So keep that in mind when you're doing this. You couldn't do this and pop this in a card to somebody. They'd be like, what happened to it? Because this will lighten up as it dries. You could go over this with embossing powder, white embossing powder, and it would make it like more of a vivid white, so like the actual surf. Wow, this turned out, I am so proud of myself. I think I did a really good job today. bad, Rach. Every once in a while, I really do a really good one. I'm going to add just a little bit since we're kind of going this way. Just a teeny bit to the edge here. Not a whole lot. Kind of let that water play up where we already put there. My gosh, I really hope you guys can't hear my stomach growling. This is ridiculous. So this, now what you could do, I am finished with it, but when you're done, you can take like your work towel and just wipe it off. But I'm definitely going to still take this downstairs because it's going to have a little film on it, and I'm rinse this off just with like some dish soap or whatever. But super pretty. I think this turned out to be super pretty. I'm not sure where the waves crashed, the sun sets to that side with the mountains, but wherever it is, it looks like it's awfully nice, right? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop these pads in real quick so I can get a couple of these things out of the way for you. I'm going to attempt, but you never know. I always get a little nervous when the battery thing comes up, so I'm going to attempt to just put these onto at least a black backing, and I'll clean all this other stuff up afterwards. I'm going to put, so make sure if you have a white one, this one is only I ever use it for white, so I keep it over here with the white ink. Put this on. Okay. So I'm going to put these, so you could, if you wanted to, put this in between a dry, clean sheet of printer paper, zoop, like so, and run it through your Big Shot. It will flatten it out a little bit. But I think with these, with the vividity of the blue, I think I would back these onto either blue or green. So I think I'm going to, since I have it here, let's see what this looks like. This is some balmy blue. That's kind of washed out looking. And that's not so bad. Maybe we're going to go with a green instead. Like a really nice green would probably be cool for this one. Yeah. So I'm going to do green. And I'm going to do, maybe I'll do like a Calypso Coral for that one. But I'm going to put it onto black first, because I think that really makes it pop nicely with that black background. Let's see if I can find two pieces. There we go. And it's not a coral. Where the heck is my coral? Oh, just reorganized my paper so well, I don't even know what I did with it. Yeah. All right. You know what I'm going to do instead? One of my other favorites that I'm really sad is going, which is grapefruit. We'll go with that. So I'm going to trim down real quickie. Quickie like here. 4 1/4. Cut this at 5 1/2. This one isn't scored. Let me score this one. I think that should be 4 1/4. Yep. And let me just trim these. So I feel like this one, that's 5. So 3 3/4 by 5. So that one should be okay at 4, 5 1/4. So that one's going to mount on here perfectly. This one is definitely a little smaller though, because this one I trimmed squirrely. So that's 5. Oh, 3 1/2. Okay. So 3 3/4 by 5 1/4. Oh, there you go. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just mount these. And you could, since I'm doing this now, what I could do after the fact is once I have this mounted, I could just open the card up. Oh my God, that looks so pretty. That really does look like a postcard. I tell you, it is just the practice. The practice makes perfect. So you could, once this is assembled, put it through a piece of paper and run it through, even if you did it as a whole card. You just put the paper over this one. It's a little weird though because of the matting with this and the size that I cut it, so it doesn't exactly line up. So you could kind of go up, down, but I ended up trimming that off just a smidge. Yeah. So it's this measure 3 3/4. I'm just going to make this 4. So normally we would have 4 1/4, but I can't decide which way I like it better. So we're just going to trim this down. So this will be, instead of being 4 1/4 when it's folded, it'll just be 4, which is fine. Okay. So that looks amazing. This is my favorite card. Really pretty. Darn, I deserve dessert tonight too. Rainbow Stamper just insisted that we make a layer cake. He's been on a cake kick lately. He's like, can we make a cake with layers so it has frosting in the middle? Who am I to tell him no? I said, sure we can. So I have a big fat layer cake down there for after dinner. And then this one will fit on here. Actually, I think with the grapefruit, it really does bring out the card of this. So this one still is pretty, don't get me wrong, but I think the other one wowed me so much. It stole the show. Fold this in half. So if you would like to get the products to make any of these cards, the Stamparatus, which helps with stamp positioning if you've never seen it, you can get all of these in my online store, Rachthestamper. Oops, see this one? Let me pull this apart a little bit. It's not stuck quite there yet because it was a little bit off. That's the thing I like about the liquid glue. But you can go to rachthestamper.stampinup.net. That is my online store. It's open 24/7. You don't have to wear your mask. You can just go right in and shop in your pajamas, in your ball gown, as I said one time, which I think somebody thought was hilarious, so that's always funny to me. There's no line. Hopefully everything we have, so you can see how this one's just a little bit shorter because I cut that off just a smidgy, but this one, because this one is also a vertical or a long ways card. But really pretty. And I think the black matting really helps to make that card pop. It really helps to accentuate the colors. But as always too, if you head to my blog, once I get this all pictured and everything, I'll post it. And you'll be able to see the measurements and all the products that we used and everything, which will link you to my store and all that kind of fun stuff. So thank you guys so much. If you haven't already, I would love for you to leave a comment. Make sure you do, because I'm going to draw a winner for that stamp set, the fishing stamp set I shared in the beginning. I'll draw a winner for that. If you do shop, you can always find my current host code on my blog. It's on the top right. There's also a search bar. I shared that earlier as well in case you don't know where to find stuff. So that's always pretty fun. And if you have questions, you can always send me an email at rachthestamper@gmail.com. You can send me a message here on YouTube. I do check all of my messages on YouTube. It's way easier here than Facebook. I try to check all the Facebook ones as well, but if you have any questions, and if not, why don't you? You have nothing to do, nothing to spend. You can like this video, leave a comment, share it with a friend, and if you don't already, make sure you subscribe and click the bell. That way you'll be notified when I make a new video and when I go live. Thank you guys so much. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. I'm going to try to be on here again, but I can't guarantee when. If I don't see you before then and you do or did serve, thank you very much for your service. I know we have Memorial Day coming up this weekend, so I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you again real soon. Thanks for watching.